Greetings! To any returning subscribers if still around, or any new people watching, I am Movie Fan 92. And I've been absent from my channel for almost 2.5 years now. Wow, I've abandoned it that long. Anyway, happy Monday, June 30th of 2025, and I'm recording this intro for the video, yeah. But for the last several days, I've been working on this, and it's been tons of editing, challenges, but it's been a lot of fun too, and just getting back into the groove of this, So, however long this will last of me posting videos again, and without further ado, we're just gonna go ahead and jump right into it. This is long overdue, and I'm excited to present the next part of the continuation to Ratman's Notebooks read-through. That's right. Sit back and enjoy the chills as Ratman's Notebooks continues. I'm on page 96, halfway through, but there is still a lot to go. Let's see how much I get through. I stepped down into the drive. I was out of sight of the house. I walked down towards the gate, not bearing unduly. Anyone coming in and meeting me would have thought I had just been paying a call at the house. I mean, not behind a tree, though I suppose they might have thought that too. At any rate, it was quite dark, especially under the trees, and there wasn't a chance that anyone could have recognized me. More likely that someone might spot the number of my car parked on the roadside. But what of it? There are lots of cars parked at the roadside, and it's only when you actually look in and say, would they mind telling you the way back to town, that the heads pop up. But I met no one. I drove home, pondering my plans. I went down to the cellar and made sure that the rats were comfortable. I'm sorry, I've no time to talk to you now, I told them. Great events are afoot. By this time, my plans were complete. I went upstairs and sat down in my armchair in front of the fire to put down my notes on paper. Socrates jumped on my knee, and I used him as a sort of book rest. So now I am writing this, comfortable and cozy, after my adventures. Tomorrow night at this time, I shall be just setting forth on the much more perilous task of actually stealing the money. Shall I return safe and sound, or shall I find myself a prisoner in the hands of the police? I left home at 10:30 and reached the Malcolmsons just before 11. I drove straight in the gate and then backed the car up a side avenue where it was well hidden by rhododendrons. You couldn't have seen it at all from the main avenue, but I parked it so that if I had to make a quick getaway, all I'd have to do was jump in and drive. I had all the rats with me, all the furry tails, that is. Since I moved the furry tails into the house, I've had nothing to do with the others. First, I had to find out what was happening at the house. I didn't expect to be able to start work for another hour or two. They might easily stay up late packing or doing last-minute jobs. On the other hand, they might go to bed early so as to be fresh for the start of their holiday. I was only slightly worried about Toby. If he was there, he might kick up a row and spoil everything. But I was almost certain he wouldn't be there. The Malcolmsons were bound to have put him into a boarding kennel or left him with friends. They wouldn't have time to dispose of him in the morning. I left the rats in the car and went on up through the trees towards the house. There was a light on in the hall, but all the rest of the downstairs part was in darkness. Upstairs, there were lights in most of the windows. For a while, I watched from a clump of bushes quite close to the house. I caught a glimpse of Malcolmson and then his wife in the same room. I wondered what they were doing, packing, going to bed. Presently, Malcolmson came right up to one of the windows and opened it. He was in pajamas. He stood there looking out. "It's very warm," he said. "You'll catch cold if you're not careful," a female voice answered. "We don't want that." "Oh, I don't think so." "Come to bed anyhow," she gave a little giggle. It was so quiet, I could hear everything. He turned round and disappeared. I waited for the light to go out, but it didn't. I wondered what on earth they were doing. And then it occurred to me that they might be one of these couples who read in bed before they go to sleep. They might read for hours, and I wouldn't know if they were awake or asleep. And fancy going to bed and leaving half the lights on, or did they mean to get up again and turn them off? Whichever way you looked at it, they were being very extravagant. I stepped out onto the lawn, but still kept in the shadows. I went round to the back of the house. It was quite dark there, except for one window upstairs, which looked like a landing window, or the window at the end of a passage. I deliberately trod on the gravel once or twice on the far side from the bedroom window. Surely if Toby was any good at all, he would hear and bark. But I didn't want the Malcolmsons to hear. There was no bark. I went right round the house, keeping on the grass where I could, tiptoeing when I couldn't. Not a sound, except from the bedroom window, when I paused a little to listen. She seemed to be an awfully giggly woman. I had avoided going really close to the house at the very front, because it was nearly all gravel there. Now I did so, and immediately discovered a strange thing. The outer front door wasn't shut. There was an inner front door with a glass panel in it. This was closed, but was it locked? I tiptoed into the porch. Surely Toby must bark now if he was there. Very, very slowly, I turned the door handle and pushed. The door wasn't locked. It opened with a slight creak. I waited again, with my hand on the handle. If Toby was there at all, he must bark now. But Toby wasn't there. I laughed to myself soundlessly. Fancy going to bed, leaving the front door open and half the lights on. I had made careful and elaborate plans for getting into the house, but they wouldn't be necessary. All I'd have to do would be to walk in the front door, bringing the rats with me. But not yet. I wanted to wait till the Malcolmsons seemed to be asleep. I shut the door as carefully as I had opened it, and went out again onto the lawn. The bedroom light was still on. Maybe they kept it on all night. Maybe one or both of them was frightened of the dark. But no. Almost immediately, the bedroom light went out. The other lights remained on. I went back to the car. By the time I came back, Mr. and Mrs. Malcolmson should be asleep. But even if they were suffering from insomnia, I didn't think it would matter very much. The car was parked about 60 yards from the house. 60 yards is a very long journey for a rat, moving under its own steam. I imagine rats must be great hitchhikers. Otherwise, I don't see how they could have got round the world the way they have. My original intention had been to carry the rats up to the house, 10 at a time. It would have been a slow business. Now I made a daring, perhaps rash change of plan. I got into the car and drove it right up to the house. I didn't leave it at the front door. I didn't want the Malcolmsons to see it when they came rushing out, tearing their hair and screaming. I parked it round at the back, again facing outwards, so that I shouldn't have to turn it after I came back. I got out quickly and ran back on tiptoe to below the bedroom window. The light was on. I heard voices. "It sounded like a car. I never heard a thing." This from hubby. "That's because you always keep your head under the clothes. You never hear anything." "I hear the beastly dawn chorus every morning. I'm sure it was a car." "Well, maybe someone made a mistake and went away again." "I didn't hear them go away." I began to regret my rashness. Then hubby said, "Oh well, if it is a burglar, we're well insured, and he can't get in here." "I suppose not." Wifey evidently was a kindly soul. I thought she might have sent hubby down to investigate, but he had her well trained. Any investigating to be done she'd obviously have to do herself, and she didn't feel like it. "Good night, darling." Hubby sounded quite firm. "Good night, dearest." And at the same moment, the light went out again. I hurried back to the car and opened the boot. The rats came pouring out, with Socrates leading the way and Ben acting as a sort of sergeant major. I walked slowly to the house. The rats followed. I put on rubber gloves and opened the front door quietly. Almost immediately, I found my first objective, the telephone. I took 2 pieces of sticky tape from my pocket. I had cut them to the right length before leaving home. I lifted the receiver and stuck down the 2 small plungers with the tape. I replaced the receiver. The rats led by Socrates were already at the foot of the stairs. I lifted Socrates onto the first step and went up 2 or 3 steps further myself. Socrates scrambled onto the second step and then looked round for the rest. The rest were hesitating. They didn't seem to want to go upstairs. Ben came hustling up, snapping his jaws. I fancy he distributed 2 or 3 sharp nips. The rats began to hop up the stairs quite fast. I went on up to the top and looked back over the banisters. The rats were flowing smoothly up the stairs after me. I tiptoed across the landing, though the carpets were so thick that I need hardly have bothered. Very gently and quietly, I turned the door handle of what I knew must be the Malcolmsons' own bedroom. I pressed against it. Nothing happened. The door was locked. So that was what he meant. He can't get in here. Gently again, I released the handle. Baffled? No. A locked door wasn't going to stop me. Almost immediately, I remembered that I had forgotten something. Telling Socrates and Ben to keep the rats where they were, I ran downstairs and very soon found the main switchboard. I turned off all the lights. Using a small pocket electric torch, I came upstairs again. I pointed to the bottom of the door with the little ring of light from my electric torch. "Tear it," I said. "In you go." Immediately the gnawing started. I stood back and listened. I didn't have to wait long. A creak from the bed. "Darling, are you awake?" No reply. Whose head was under the clothes this time? Darling, are you awake? There's a most awfully funny noise. Dig her in the ribs, man. It won't do her a bit of harm. This, of course, was under my breath, but you'd have thought he had heard me. At any rate, he must have done something, for wifey awoke. What's the matter, dearest? Listen, darling, do you not hear something? The scraping and gnawing went on. You think there was something trying to get through the door? Do you think Toby could have escaped? If it was Toby, he'd bark or something. First that car, then this. We'll get no sleep tonight. No, I murmured, just loud enough for myself to hear. Turn on the light, dearest, and see what on earth it is. Pause while hubby tried to turn on the light. It won't work, darling. There must be a power cut. Another pause. The rats were really making a terrific noise. Dearest, do you not think you'd better see what it is? Stop, I whispered to the rats. There was a moment of dead silence. The bed creaked, and I heard hubby's feet hit the floor. I waited for him to turn the key and open the door, but instead I heard his voice again. It seems to have stopped, darling. He must have been standing by the edge of the bed, funking it. Tear it, I whispered again to the rats, and the din started once more. If he waited another minute, they'd be through under the door and into the room whether he opened up or not. That might make things more difficult. Suddenly, I realized the door was opening. I'd never heard the key. I suppose the rats were making too much noise. Now was the critical moment. If he tried to close the door again, I'd have to put my shoulder to it and make sure that he couldn't. But he didn't try. He felt rats crawling over his feet and jumped back into the room. I gave the door a push and peered in, being careful not to show myself. Hubby gave a scream. It's rats! Millions of them! For a moment, I saw him against the light of the window. They didn't even draw the curtains, sort of dancing on the floor. Then he jumped on to the bed. It was wifey's turn to scream. Whether he landed on her or whether it was just the word rats, I don't know. Next moment, she was standing up on the bed beside him. I got down on my hands and knees and began to crawl through the door. Do something! She screamed. Whether she saw me or not, I don't know. I kept as close to the floor as possible and was careful not to look up. I didn't want them to see my face. What can I do? Hubby wailed. No dearests and darlings now. As they say, it takes very little to remove the thin veneer of civilization. I wriggled across the floor to the edge of the bed. It was rather a high bed for nowadays. I got half underneath it, and then, lying on my back, I began to lift rats onto the bed. I put Ben up first. He's a nasty, vicious brute, and he went straight for hubby's toes. Hubby gave another scream. He was a good screamer, that man, and did the leap of the century into the middle of the floor. He must have landed on a rat because there was a sort of squeal that I knew pretty well wasn't human. It didn't stop him. He ran half stumbling over rats, I suppose out of the door. You're not leaving me? Wifey called. You bet he is, I said to myself, and if I know Ben, you won't be long after him. The stairs seem clear, hubby called. You'd better run for it. Then Ben got at her toes, and run she did. Talk of flying angels. The way she left that bed, you could call it vertical takeoff. Well, I didn't want them to gather their wits together and start doing something sensible, like finding the lights were off or getting sticks to defend themselves. So I turned the rats round and sent them down the stairs after dearest hubby and darling wifey. Still without showing myself, I came to the door and after a moment or two out onto the landing to see what was happening. As soon as they found the rats following them down the stairs, hubby and wifey made a bolt for it, right down to the hall. They stopped there for a moment because they discovered they were a little ahead of the rats, which were hopping down rather slowly. "You telephone," wifey ordered, "while I find a coat. We may have to go outside." "Who'll I telephone?" "Telephone the police, of course, 999. By this time I was peering over the banisters. I could see him in a vague kind of way. He stumbled over something. I think he must have stubbed his toe, for he started cursing a bit, not very loud. "Hell's gates! Where's the bloody thing got to?" But he found it, and of course had to yell again for wifey. "I can't see the numbers. What do I do now?" "Phil, you fool! Do you not know yet the nine's next to not?" No Wiener left. I heard him fumbling about with the phone for a bit, and then he said, "There's no dialing tone." She was back with her coat by this time. "Oh, give it me," she told him. So she tried, but of course the tape I had put on was doing its work. "It's out of order," she complained. "Isn't it just like them? On a night like this, too." I couldn't see the rats, but I thought they must be in the hall by this time. Sure enough, hubby gave a yell. "Here they are! We'll have to run for it." I heard the front door open and shut. I went to a window over the porch. I saw them pick their way over the gravel to the grass. Once on the grass, they began to run. They went on the verge beside the drive. Wifey was wearing the coat. Hubby had nothing on but his pajamas. I went back to the bedroom and began to look round by the light of my electric torch. There was a dead rat in the middle of the floor. Hubby must have broken its back when he jumped out of bed. I left it there for evidence. The money was on the dressing table. I shoved it in my pocket. Also on the dressing table were 2 books of traveler's checks. No use to me. I got Socrates to nibble a bit off each and drop them on the floor. I ran down the stairs, switched on the lights again, and untaped the telephone. I went out the front door and looked up and down. It wasn't very dark. I could see as far as the edge of the trees fairly distinctly. I felt reasonably sure there was no one about. I went round to the back and got into the car. All this time, I had Socrates in my pocket. I drove round to the front door, going dead slow for the last little bit, just in case any of the rats had strayed out onto the gravel. I went into the house again and called to the rats. In 5 minutes, they were all in the car. I looked round the hall fairly quickly to see that none had been left behind, but I didn't really care a great deal if 1 or 2 got lost. The only one that really mattered to me as an individual was Socrates, plus Ben in the sense that he's useful. I started the car and drove slowly as far as the edge of the trees. I didn't put on the car lights. If the Malcolmsons were still about, I didn't want to attract their attention. They might come snooping along and take the number of the car. As soon as the car was under the trees, I switched off the engine. There was a slope all the way to the gate, and I hoped to get out onto the road without attracting attention. I couldn't see very well, and I had to keep my foot on the brake so as not to go too fast. There was a slight danger that I might run over the Malcolmsons, but I felt they should be well out along the road by this time. I got to the road and it was still downhill. I didn't have to turn on the engine. The car rolled on gently and silently towards the city. I passed a cottage. Someone was battering at the door. "Please let us in, please." I heard no more. Nothing but the swish of the car tires. I began to laugh. The cottagers must be heavy sleepers. Maybe an agricultural laborer, who had worked hard in the fields all day. Or maybe they were frightened to open the door. I mean, there are all sorts of strange characters about nowadays. Or perhaps the cottage was empty. It wasn't a really cold night, but I thought of him in his pajamas and her with not much more, and both with bare feet. I suppose we freewheeled another half-mile before I switched on the headlights and the engine. We got home without incident. My raid on the Malcolmsons is a sensation. The local evening paper had it on the front page, with big headlines, and it's in all the national dailies this morning. No one knows what to make of it. Everyone is a little frightened. It's come out that there have been previous rat raids. The courting couple we chased from their car. Jones's Tires, the grocer, everything is being added together, including a lot of things that have no connection with my rats at all. Damage in food stores, damage to crops, babies bitten by rats in slums. The country has suddenly become rat conscious. The Malcolmsons are both in hospital, suffering from shock and exposure. Their condition is stated not to be serious. Jones has been interviewed on TV. It appears the police did ask him to keep quiet about his tires. They couldn't make up their minds if it was rats or a malicious human. It's a wonder I was never questioned. But it wouldn't occur to Jones that I might have a grudge against him. Little friend of all the world, I don't think. "Now," he says from the TV screen, "the time for secrecy is past. Everyone must get together and put an end to this scandal." The papers are still going on about the rats. It is being suggested that the rat population far outnumbers the human population. At any moment, the rats of the world may arise and murder the humans, while the humans lie asleep in their beds. These vermin must be eradicated. They are costing a hungry world millions of lives every year. One paper calls for a World Rat Year. Mrs. Malcolmson has been interviewed on her release from hospital. They are to stay with friends for a few days before deciding whether to continue with their holiday or not. There is a photograph of her clasping Toby. Toby is licking her face, but that's not the point. She insists that there was one huge rat as big as a man, which crawled slowly across the floor from the door to the bed. Obviously, the interviewers didn't know what to make of this. There's a headline, "Rat as big as man," in one paper, and another has "Rat monster." It goes on. Asked what the rat monster looked like, Mrs. Malcolmson said it was quite obscene. This, of course, is me. What does she mean, obscene? Incidentally, hubby didn't see any rat monster. The way it's put in the interview makes it plain that he doesn't think his wife did either, though he's polite enough not actually to say so. Only today did I realize the significance of the appearance of Toby in the photograph with Mrs. Malcolmson. As usual, the information came from Jones via the bookkeeper. Jones is enjoying a kind of double fame at present. First of all, he knows the Malcolmsons. That's quite something these days. And as the Malcolmsons are so well off, it gives you a standing socially as well as conversationally. And of course, he's a rat victim himself. That ensures immediate attention. He says if he'd known what was happening to his tires, he'd have gone out and laid about him with a stick. They're quite easy to deal with if you don't lose your head. A cut with a stick and you snap the backbone, just like that. But are you not afraid of them going for your throat, Mr. Jones? They say they can tear your throat out with their teeth and you're dead in a matter of seconds. This from the girl looking at Jones as if he was her hero. It'd sicken you. Jones and the bookkeeper standing talking in the middle of the cash office, the girl gazing up adoringly and openly eavesdropping. I don't think any rat would go for my throat, declared the brave and gallant Jones. It would have short thrift if it did. It appears that the dog Toby was booked for the gas chamber while sweet wifey and hubby were hitting the high spots in London. They were fond of poor Toby, and he wasn't particularly old, but they couldn't afford to pay for him in boarding kennels while they were away. The RSPCA was going to keep him for a week free. Then, if nobody wanted him, put him down painlessly. The Malcolmsons would have got a new puppy after they came back and had time to settle down. Far more fun than placid old Toby. Now remorse has struck. Toby was uneasy the night before the raid. Perhaps even then the rats were prowling and about to strike. Brave dog Toby rushed out barking without a thought for his own safety and drove them off. So brave dog Toby, protector of dear master and mistress, who really love him deeply, is to be preserved to an honored old age. This, of course, didn't appear in the papers, but all the Malcolmsons' friends, who it seems are in the habit of dealing with their own dogs in the same way, have been talking about it, so I saved Toby's life. The idea of a rat monster has been taken up seriously by 2 of the Sunday papers. What did Mrs. Malcolmson see? The other more effectively, I thought. What Mrs. Malcolmson saw fair makes your flesh creep, don't it? What she saw, it appears, was a monster, half human, half rat. Scientists have long been aware that legendary creatures such as the mysterious monster of Glamis really do exist. Their occurrence, fortunately, is rare, but when they occur, they present a fearful menace to humanity. In the present instance, it would seem that such a creature is loose in our midst, a monster Ratman. There was a whole lot more, all pseudo-scientific, in a very crude sort of way. I don't know how much faith anyone puts in it. Probably the less educated swallow it whole, while the highbrows reject it absolutely. No matter, but everyone has started to talk of Ratman, and whether they really believe in Ratman or not, everyone's on the lookout for him. The girl certainly is. What do you think of Ratman? She asked me. I determined to be bold. The way to throw them off the trail is certainly not to pretend I don't believe in Ratman. I think he's hiding somewhere. D, you reply? Yes. I expect he's lying up waiting to strike again. Because of all the excitement, I won't bring Socrates and Ben into the office anymore, just at present. Someone might notice their droppings, and then there'd be a general hunt. I miss Socrates when I'm working late, and that's nearly every night, except Friday. When I went up to bed last night with Socrates, I found Ben curled up in the middle of the eater down, sound asleep. At first, I didn't know what to do. Ben is a very different rat from Socrates. I don't know why, but I have always felt slightly afraid of him. Wakened suddenly, he might turn and snap. I've never been bitten by one of the rats yet, and I don't want to be. After watching Ben for a moment or two, I put Socrates down on the pillow and gave the eater down a sharp tug. Ben awoke, sprang up, and glared at me most angrily. At first I was frightened. Ben looked as if he meant to fight it out, but I knew I mustn't be frightened. If I started letting myself be frightened of the rats, what on earth would be the end of it? So I said sternly, Ben, you know very well you're not allowed here, and picked him up as I was speaking. He did snap at me, but he took good care not to bite. I gave him a little tap on the head with my forefinger and repeated, Bad Ben, once or twice. Then I carried him downstairs and put him onto the cellar with the others. I went to bed with Socrates beside me as usual and fell asleep almost immediately. But when I awoke this morning, Ben was back on the bed, under the eater down this time, on the opposite side of me to Socrates. I lay quiet for a little, thinking what to do. Apart from Socrates, I don't want to give the rats the run of the house. Particularly, I don't want them in my bedroom. And more particularly, still I don't want them all crawling over the bed. I'll teach you, I thought suddenly, and I gave a great big kick under the clothes just where Ben was lying. Ben shot out towards the middle of the floor, landing there with a fair bang. That'll larn you to do what you're told, I shouted at him. Next moment, I was sorry. I was afraid that the fall might have done him an injury, but it didn't seem to have. He looked stunned for a moment or two, but perhaps it was because he hadn't quite wakened up. Then he gave me a look that was anything but cowed or cowed. In fact, it was diabolical, and went slowly off behind the dressing table. I hadn't time to do anything about him then. I had to hurry to get into work, but when I came home this evening, he was back with the other rats in the cellar. It was obvious how he had got both out and in. There was a hole gnawed in the bottom of the cellar door. I spent the evening patching it up. Then I covered the whole bottom of the door with tin. 2 old biscuit tins, which I cut up for the purpose, and fixed on with tacks. We'll see how he likes tin and tacks to sharpen his teeth on. This morning, I again found Ben on the bed. He wasn't asleep. He was watching me. For a while, we both remained quite still, our eyes fixed on each other. A sudden kick would be no good this time. The slightest movement on my part would be met by a counter move. I wondered what he would do if I drew up my left leg so as to get it into position to give him a hefty kick like yesterday morning's. Would he jump quickly over to my right side where Socrates was still sound asleep, or would he go at my throat, which was uncovered, and try to kill me? I didn't think he could succeed. I would get my hand up pretty quickly. Still, it was a nasty thought. Ben looked very fierce. His teeth were slightly barred, and his hair was standing on end. Perhaps the nips he had at the Malcolmson's toes had given him a taste for human blood. If Ben did attack, would Socrates help me? I was sure at any rate that he wouldn't join in against me. Keeping my eyes fixed on Ben, I edged slightly over towards Socrates. Socrates woke up, uncurled, and stretched himself. He licked his hands and began to wash his face. Ben dug his claws into the quilt and gripped it tightly. I realized at once that he had no intention of attacking me, only of holding on like grim death. While I had no intention of projecting him into the middle of the floor a second time, I had no wish to hurt him. I slipped out of bed at the right-hand side, disturbing Socrates as little as possible. Socrates continued the regular routine of his grooming. I had no time to deal with Ben just then. It's always a rush getting out of the house in the morning. I suppose I should train myself to wake up earlier. Ben will have to be taught who's master, but it will have to wait till tomorrow morning. Now I know he doesn't mean to attack me. I know exactly what to do. I am going to take up Father's old walking stick when I go to bed tonight. I shall leave it across the end of the bed behind my pillow, where I can reach it in the morning, almost without moving. Ben's in for a nasty surprise. Not that I shall do him any harm, just teach him a lesson. But I don't know how he got out. The tin's still there on the bottom of the door. The walking stick was effective. I set myself to wake up much earlier than usual, and was successful. There was Ben lying on the quilt at my left side. He was awake, too. I pulled myself up sharply in the bed and grabbed the stick. Ben dug his claws in, prepared to hold on. I don't think he had any idea what I was going to do. I got into a half-kneeling position and gave him a first quite gentle prod with the stick. Ben snapped at it. I prodded him again a little harder, and then harder and harder. He tried to get a hold of the stick in his mouth, but he couldn't. He kept on snapping. He tried to dodge round the point of the stick. There was a furrow on it, but I kept making quick, whippy movements with my wrist so that he couldn't get past. Inexorably, I forced him back towards the end of the bed, careful all the time to do him no real damage. I could see he was furious. Given half a chance, he would have counterattacked with teeth and claws. but I gave him no chance, and all of a sudden, he realized he couldn't win. He turned and ran down a piece of hanging blanket, jumping the last 6 or 9 inches to the floor. Then he went under the bed. Now what to do? If I settled down and went to sleep, he'd be up again in a moment. I'd have to get him right out of the room, teach him that this was no place for him. If I got up in the ordinary way, I felt quite convinced that as soon as my toes came dangling down the side of the bed, Ben would have a go at them, nipping them as he'd done with Malcolmson's. Incidentally, my bed's pretty high, higher even than the Malcolmsons. An iron bed with brass knobs at the corners, so that there's normally quite a bit of dangling time before my feet reach the floor. Incidentally, again, I'm sure it's much easier to make than a modern bed, because you don't have to bend down so far. I decided to leap suddenly into the middle of the floor, grasping the stick firmly in my right hand. I leapt. I turned round quickly and crouched down, facing the bed. At the side nearest to me, the bedclothes had slipped right down to the floor, so that I couldn't see underneath. Socrates, who had slept all through my duel with Ben, had at last woken up. He came to the edge of the bed and peered down at me, looking rather puzzled. I advanced to the bed, swishing the stick backwards and forwards, or rather sideways and sideways, along the floor, watching every minute for Ben to jump out from under the bed and renew the battle. Ben didn't show himself. I swished the stick right along under the edge of the clothes. I felt nothing. I swished again, a little further in. Again, nothing. I advanced a little more, thrust the whole length of the stick under the bed, and waggled it furiously. Sound of stick against china. I caught the hanging blankets and sheet with the point of the stick and flicked them one by one onto the top of the bed. This is a little inconvenience Socrates, who found himself getting covered in bedclothes and had to retreat to my pillow, where his view of the proceedings was not nearly so good. I peered under the bed. There was no one there, nothing in fact but Edgar Allan, which I hardly ever use because of the nuisance of emptying it. Well, he might be in there. It's a nice flowery one with a handle. I reversed the stick, attached the crook to Edgar's handle, and pulled. No, Ben wasn't there. He must have scurried out the opposite side during the time it was hidden from me by my bedclothes. I spent nearly an hour searching the room for Ben. I didn't find him. When at last I got back to bed, it was within half an hour of getting up time, and I didn't get any more sleep. As I usually do, unless I'm very late, I made my bed before going down for breakfast. I left the stick along the top behind the pillow as before, but perhaps tomorrow morning I shan't need it. Last night I was late getting to bed. I was home late after working in the office till nearly 10, and I suppose being tired slowed me down. I took longer than usual dealing with the rats in the cellar, also in writing my notes. After that, I fell asleep in my chair. Socrates woke me up by scratching my hand with his paw, very gently at first, so that I dreamed that there was a fly walking over my hand, and then that I had been bitten by a plague. I thought that there would be no harm in taking him into the office again, and Ben, too, of course, to keep him company. All the talk about rats seems to have died away, and the plan for a great rat purge put forward by one of the papers has been forgotten. I went upstairs. I hadn't been in my bedroom since the morning, and first thing I did was to look for Father's stick behind the pillow. In a way, it was there, and in a way, it wasn't. It had been divided into little bits, each not more than 1 inch long. There were smaller bits all over the place. I showed it to Socrates, and you could almost see him shaking his head in disapproval. "That young rat will come to a bad end," he was saying to himself. I burst out laughing. You had to hand it to Ben. He was unbeatable, or thought he was. Then I chuckled quietly to myself. Thought he had me beat, did he? Well, he'd another think coming. I'd show him. I nipped downstairs and got the poker from the sitting room. It's not used anymore because I've no time to light coal fires. So it was quite clean. I put it behind the pillow where the stick had been. I undressed very quickly, got into bed, and turned out the light. I intended to stay awake for a little, though not very long, because I was tired and meant to get my sleep. But I had an idea that before very long, friend Ben would turn up for a nice sleep on my eider-down. I had a pretty shrewd idea that he got into my room through a hole in the floor under the dressing table. It was no good covering it with tin. He'd just make another hole somewhere else, and I couldn't cover the whole floor with tin. At first, I felt quite excited, but soon I began to get sleepy. I was thinking, it'll do just as well in the morning, and practically dozing off when I heard a scuffly sort of noise from the direction of the dressing table. Here you come, my boy, I thought, and you're in for a big surprise. I heard his feet patter across the floor. No pause to reconnoitre. RECONNOITRE. He was quite sure I was sound asleep by this time. Not that reconnoitering would have done him any good. I was pretending to be asleep. He jumped straight onto the bed. Not onto the top. Just high enough to get his claws in, and I felt the slight drag on the bedclothes as he scrambled up the rest of the way. Quite a jump all the same. Then he found the same place on top of the eider-down, and spent quite a time going round and round, making a kind of nest for himself. When everything was arranged to his satisfaction, he settled down for his night's sleep. Well, I thought, getting a bit careless, aren't you? Don't care if you wake me up or not. I waited till I thought he'd just about be into his beauty sleep. Then I sat up quickly, turned on the bedside light, and waved the poker over my head. You should have seen the expression on his face. It was ludicrous. He didn't wait to argue. One look was enough. He didn't want the poker in his ribs. Dive, and he was on the floor. He scuttled across it and under the dressing table. "And you needn't come back," I called after him. "You won't eat through the poker in a hurry." That was last night. Tonight, I don't quite know why. I suppose just to make sure he hadn't gnawed through the poker. I went straight up to my bedroom as soon as I got in. The poker wasn't there. What's more, there wasn't a single poker in the whole house. There were tongs, of course, brass curtain rods, shovels, but I decided to admit defeat. Whatever I choose as a weapon to take to bed with me will be spirited away during the day. An occasion may arise when I shall need a curtain rail. There's no sense showing Ben how a curtain rail could be used. In any case, I think I shall take both Ben and Socrates into the office tomorrow. All the fuss about rats seems to have died down. I don't see why they shouldn't be perfectly safe in the book room. In fact, they'd have been safe there all along. I've never seen anyone go in except myself, and I don't think anyone has seen me. It'll keep Ben out of mischief and stop him from leading the other rats into mischief, because I'm quite sure he couldn't have purloined the poker all by himself. Even as a combined effort, it was a considerable feat. For the last month, I've been taking Socrates and Ben into the office with me every day, except Fridays. I go in a little early in the morning and pop them into the book room before anyone arrives. At night, when everyone else has gone, I bring them into the cash office with me and let them run about there while I work. But on Fridays, Jones himself works late, so I might have difficulty getting them out of the book room again without being seen. I don't know what Jones does every Friday night, but he insists on having the whole place to himself. All the rest of us have to leave promptly at 5:30. I'm sure he's up to some fiddle or other. I wish I could find out what. I don't understand the relative positions of Ben and Socrates. I've always supposed that Ben was the son of Socrates, but they might be brothers. My main reason for thinking them father and son is that I haven't seen old Ma Rat since the very beginning, long before Ben appeared, and I've assumed she must be dead. I think Ben is cleverer than Socrates. Certainly he is more cunning, more independent. He and Socrates appear perfectly friendly, but I wonder if Ben has taken over as boss. I don't mean boss over Socrates himself, but boss over the other rats. King Rat, you might say. If this is so, I think it must be since our last escapade. I wonder if it had anything to do with the fact that we had one rat killed. Could they possibly mind about that? Today the girl came into the cash office and said she'd heard a scuffling noise from the book room when she was in the ladies next door. Were there mice in there? I said it had always been full of mice, but that there was sheet iron nailed onto the partition between it and the ladies, so that no mice could get in. This satisfied her. Of course, there's no sheet iron, and I don't know if there have ever been any mice either, but I think it was rather clever of me to dream all that up on the spur of the moment. It'll stop her making a complaint to Jones or the bookkeeper, and it will probably prevent her or any of the other girls even venturing into the book room. Of course, she couldn't get in without the key, but she's pretty nosy and might easily have found some excuse to get the place opened up. Saying she's nosy doesn't mean I don't find her attractive. I do. In fact, if I were differently situated, that is to say, if I had sufficient money and there were no rats, I would probably ask her to marry me. I only realized this today, just after I had told her the tale about the mice. Of course, what she really heard was Ben, or Socrates, or both. I said to her, "Oh, there's a little mouse on the floor now!" She immediately gave me a shriek and jumped onto a chair. Perhaps I thought that would happen. Perhaps I wanted it to happen. At any rate, she looked very pretty up there, and appealing. She has shapely legs, just a shade on the thin side, I suppose by beauty queen standards, but there's something about her knees. Anyhow, I had a good stare. Then I told her I was only joking. She gave me a sort of arch look and stepped down very daintily. I'm quite sure she didn't mind a bit. Any chance to show themselves off. That's what girls like. In fact, I can't see how modern girls need to worry about mice. It might have been different when they were afraid of mice running up inside their skirts, but it would be a very athletic mouse who could ever reach a modern skirt. A pole jumping mouse, perhaps, if you can imagine such a thing, and I can quite easily. The girl, by the way, is still very interested in me. I just have to say the word and she'd come for a drive in the car like a shot, tea or no tea. I can hardly bear to write down what's happened, but I will. It was the girl's fault, her and Jones. Jones did it. I didn't hear any shriek, not from the girl, I mean, but I'm sure there was one. The first I noticed was a bit of commotion in the passage. Nothing much. One or two people hurrying and talking, and one of them was the girl. I know her voice. I didn't pay any attention. I went on with my work. Next I heard Jones proceeding down the passage. I know his step. Always a little more dignified. This was enough for the bookkeeper. If Jones was going, he was going to. Out he went. I was feeling rather contemptuous and standoffish, determined not to follow the crowd, ready to say in a land guide voice when they got back, "Well, and what was all that fuss about?" All the same, I wondered very much what was up and was having quite a fight with my own curiosity. Then suddenly it occurred to me, has someone gone into the book room and found Socrates? Till this moment, the two rats hadn't entered my thoughts. I had grown so accustomed to leaving them in the book room every day, without anything happening, and I felt sure no one but myself had been in the book room for years. I jumped up and rushed down to the back. There they all were, Jones, the bookkeeper, the whole staff. The door of the ladies was open, not the actual WC door, but the place where they wash their hands and make tea, and I suppose actually do powder their noses. Inside were Jones and the girl, both looking up. "Here," Jones said. "Someone get me a long stick or a rod or something. I'll soon fix it." At first, I couldn't see anything, but I'd awful forebodings. I edged a little closer, pushing past the bookkeeper, who seemed to be drawing back. High up on top of the wall behind the basin, in a little recess between two rafters, was Socrates. He was quite still, and you'd wonder the girl had noticed him. Of course, that's the sort of her. Notices everything. To anyone but me, Socrates would probably have seemed quite unruffled, but his hair was all standing on end, and I knew he was very frightened. I guessed at once what had happened. Rafters run across under the roof of the ladies, and into the wall which divides it from the book room. Both are one-story additions to the main building, which just run out into the yard behind the offices. The wall is 2 bricks thick, but for some reason there is no top row of bricks on the ladies' side. This makes a row of little recesses, and one of them goes right through to the book room. In fact, there's 1 brick missing from the top row on the book room side as well. All this, of course, I've discovered since. Socrates must have come through the hole, possibly looking for water. I'd never thought of leaving them water. On the wall above the basins was a big old mirror, about 4 feet broad, with a thick black wooden frame, 3 to 4 inches deep. After coming through the tunnel from the book room, Socrates must have jumped down onto the top of this, run along it, and by a series of small leaps got down to the basin for his drink. On the way back, perhaps he had been flustered by the girl coming in and turning on the light. He had missed the tunnel and gone into the recess next to it, a dead end. All he had to do now to escape was to come out, jump down again onto the top of the mirror, run along 5 or 6 inches, hop up into the next recess, and run through to the safety of the book room. Well, it would be safe for the time being. They'd have a job finding him in there among hundreds of old books, receipt files, bags full of old letters. I didn't know what to do. I could have spoken to Socrates, calmed him, told him to come out quickly before it was too late, and run along the top of the mirror to the next recess, for I knew that the office junior had gone off to look for the rod or stick that Jones had demanded. I could even have climbed up onto the top of the basins and coaxed Socrates out. I could have pretended I was trying to catch him, and then pretended to be angry when he wriggled out of my hands and escaped through the tunnel. I didn't think of that, not till afterwards, when it was too late. But I did think of speaking to him. I didn't dare. Everyone at once, as soon as they saw that Socrates understood my instructions and obeyed them, would have known that there really was a Ratman, that I was Ratman. So I stood in an agony of dither and fear, and said nothing. The boy came back with a metal rod, a thin tube of some kind, about 6 feet long. "The very thing!" Jones exclaimed. He took the rod and made a sort of exploratory poke, not very hard, into the recess, and then I knew that he had seen me. I mean that Socrates had seen me. He threw me a sort of look as if to say, "Aren't you going to stop him?" And of course I could have stopped him. I'm bigger than Jones, and a good deal younger. But I did nothing. I didn't even say, "Stop!" I was afraid. I was a coward. The next poke, though still only experimental, was a little harder. Socrates drew back into the recess and made himself smaller. You'd hardly have known he was there. At the third poke, Socrates screamed. The scream seemed to excite Jones. "I've got him now," he said. "He doesn't like that. I'll give him a bit more of the same medicine." And he began to prod at Socrates quite furiously. At last Socrates tried to come out, first at one side of the little recess, and then at the other, but Jones, by a sort of brilliant exhibition of swordsmanship, drove him back, and every time Jones prodded, Socrates screamed. When he drew back after the second attempt to get out, the screaming became continuous. "Oh, do stop, please, Mr. Jones," the girl exclaimed suddenly. Jones was astonished. "Why do you want me to stop?" he asked. It's too horrible. It's cruel." "It's not cruel at all," Jones replied. "Rats are vermin. Got to be exterminated," he went on, prodding. The next time I saw the end of the rod, it was covered in blood. But Socrates wasn't dead. He was still screaming. I drew back. I couldn't bear to watch anymore, but I couldn't go away. I felt that even if I didn't dare to do anything, it would be wrong to go away. I had to see Socrates dead. He took a long time to die. The screaming stopped. "Has he kicked it?" the boy asked. The boy who'd brought the rod. You could see he was thoroughly enjoying it all, grinning all over his face. "Not a bit of him," Jones answered. "There's one of his legs still moving, but I'll soon finish him off now." There was no more screaming, just the prodding, and soon that stopped. Jones was satisfied that Socrates was dead. "How are you going to get him out?" the boy asked. "Oh, I'll get him out all right." He thrust the bloody rod once more into the recess and pushed hard. Then he drew it out again, and impaled on the end of it was a mess of blood and fur and guts. For a moment Jones forgot his dignity and brandished it at the girls. "How do you like that?" They all shrieked and drew back, but they weren't really horrified. Some of them even smiled a little. "You've made an awful mess of our cloakroom," one of the typists said. "Who's going to clean it up?" "You are," Jones said. "If you don't know how to use a mop, it's about time you learnt." They all seemed in doubt for a moment, but the girl went off and got a mop from the cupboard under the stairs, and I saw one of the typists with a bucket. The rest of us went back to our work. I didn't work late tonight. To tell the truth, I could hardly work at all, but I had to wait till all the others had gone before I could fetch Ben out of the book room. I felt almost like leaving him behind. I didn't want to have anything to do with him, anything to do with anything that had to do with what had happened. But of course I couldn't leave him. And when I went to the book room, I was suddenly sorry for him. Poor Ben was terrified. No wonder. He was even terrified of me. If he hadn't seen everything, he had heard everything. And after all, who had prodded him with a stick and a poker in the bedroom at home? Who had stood by and done nothing while Socrates was prodded to death? Who had brought them both into the dangerous place? So Ben looked at me fearfully. Obviously he must want, to go home, away from this gruesome place. But could he trust me to take him, or would I deliver him up to be done to death, as I had let Socrates be done to death? Perhaps I would even kill him myself. It took half an hour of coaxing to get him into the bag, and then of course I took him straight home. I've spent all evening with him trying to soothe him. I never really liked him before, but now Socrates is gone, I feel a new affection for him. I see that he may even come to take the place of Socrates with me. Well, I think I'll stop it right there in this point, and until I'm able to continue. Thanks for watching.